Montana Territory, 1883. The wind howled over the Bitterroot Valley as Sheridan Brooks fled through the pines, clutching a bundled infant tight to her chest, her boots soaked through from crossing Lolo Creek. She did not steal the baby. But the sheriff back in Missoula thought otherwise. Folks had seen her ride out of town with the child, alone, and no one had seen the mother since. Now posters were being nailed to trees with her name on them. Wanted for kidnapping. Her throat burned from running, from crying, from praying. She had no plan except to keep moving. The baby whimpered. Sheridan pressed her lips to the boy's forehead. "It's all right, little one," she whispered, rocking him gently. "I have you." His name was Waylon, barely 6 months old. His mother Clara had begged Sheridan to watch him for a few hours while she worked at the laundry. But Clara never came back. Just vanished. Sheridan waited 2 days before panic set in, before she decided to find help. And now here she was branded a thief. She heard hooves. Sheridan ducked behind a fallen log, heart pounding. The baby fussed louder. She rocked him harder. The rider came slow, steady, like he was tracking. Then he stopped. "I can hear you breathing," the man called out, voice low and calm. "Not here to hurt you." She dared a peek. A tall cowboy sat atop a buckskin gelding, his hat pulled low, rifle sheathed at his side. Sunlight caught the dust on his jacket. He looked right at her hiding spot. "I saw the posters," he said. "But I also saw you buy milk in Stevensville with your last coin. For that boy." Sheridan stood slowly, shielding Waylon with her body. "You following me?" "Not exactly," he said. "Name's Declan Vaughn. I run cattle west of here." "You looked like you needed help." "Help?" she snapped. "Or turn me in for the bounty?" He dismounted, hands in plain sight. "I saw how you held him. That's not the way a thief carries a child." She said nothing, just held Waylon closer. "I believe you," he added, softer now. Sheridan's knees buckled with relief, though she didn't let it show. "Why?" he shrugged. "Because I got eyes. And because I know what it looks like when someone runs for the right reason." The baby started crying again. Declan offered his canteen. "Here. If you let me ride you both back to my ranch, we can figure this out. You and the boy will be safe there." She hesitated. "Why would you risk your neck for me?" "Because I do not think you meant harm. And because no one should face this kind of trouble alone." They locked eyes, hers wary, his steady. She nodded once. Declan helped her into the saddle and swung up behind her. Sheridan sat stiffly, holding Waylon, while Declan guided them through the trees. His hand rested lightly at her back, warm, solid. She had not felt safe in days, but something about his presence pulled her breath back into rhythm. They rode until dusk, arriving at a small log cabin tucked into the foothills, smoke curling from the chimney. Declan dismounted and reached up to help her down. She hesitated, but his grip was gentle. Inside, the cabin was sparse but clean. A fire crackled. Declan fetched warm milk for the baby and stew for Sheridan. She ate slowly, eyes never leaving his. "You live here alone?" she asked. "For now," he said, sitting across from her. "Had a brother, but he died in the war. Parents passed after that." She nodded. "I was raised in a church orphanage. Never knew my folks." Declan studied her. "So you know how it feels to be left behind." Sheridan's eyes watered, but she blinked fast. "I would never take a child from his mother. Clara asked me to help. Then she disappeared." "You think someone hurt her?" "I do not know. But she would not leave him." Declan leaned forward. "Then we will find out what happened. But you stay here, all right? No one will touch the boy. Or you." Her voice cracked. "Why do you care?" He looked at her for a long beat. "Because I know what it is to be wrongly judged. And because I want to." That night, she slept in the loft with Waylon tucked beside her. Down below, she heard Declan stoke the fire, heard him pacing quietly. There was no lock on the door. No chains. Just trust. And for the first time in days, Sheridan let herself sleep. In the morning, she found Declan outside saddling his horse. "I am riding into Missoula," he said. "To ask around. Quietly. You think they will talk to you? Better chance than if you went. Take care of the boy. I will be back by dusk." Sheridan watched him ride off, heart torn between dread and hope. Waylon fussed in her arms. She held him tight, whispering, "I think he is telling the truth." By sunset, Declan returned. He slammed the door behind him, jaw tight. Clara was last seen speaking to a man outside the saloon. Someone said he was pressing her hard. She looked scared. Sheridan's stomach twisted. Who was he? Name is Rusk. Known troublemaker. Got a string of past charges, but nothing sticks. I think she was taken. She sat hard on the bench, holding Waylon close. Then we have to find her. Declan nodded. We will. But you cannot go to town. They are still looking for you. She looked up at him, eyes fierce. I will not let that boy grow up without knowing what happened to his mother. Declan stepped closer. Then we do this together. Their eyes met, something deep and unspoken rising between them. I do not know why you are helping me, she whispered. He reached out, brushing a stray curl from her cheek. Maybe because I see something in you, something that feels right. Her breath caught, but she did not pull away. The baby stirred and whimpered. Sheridan looked down, then back up at Declan. He needs a home. Declan smiled, quiet and real. Maybe we all do. And in that moment, something shifted. Not just safety. Not just kindness. Something more. Something that felt like the beginning of love. The first frost settled that morning, dusting the grass with silver as Sheridan stepped out onto the porch, Waylon bundled tight against her chest. The land beyond Declan's fence stretched pale and wide, the cottonwoods bare now, their bones etched against the sky. She hadn't spoken much since he returned with news of Clara's last sighting. Her thoughts were a tight loop of worry and guilt. Declan stood near the barn, hammering slats onto a new pen. He paused, glancing toward her. You warm enough? She nodded, though her fingers ached. He slept most the night. First time. He set the hammer down. That's good. She walked toward him, careful not to wake the baby. Do you think we'll find her out there? Clara. He picked up a length of rope, coiling it without rush. If she's somewhere to be found, I'll see it through. There's no trail, she said. After that man Rusk, no one saw a thing. Declan tied the rope off and leaned against the fence. He's got a cabin north of the river. Folks say he keeps to himself, but I've heard different. There's a trapper I trade with near there. Might know something. I want to go. He shook his head once. Too risky. If someone recognizes you, they won't ask questions. Then take me as your wife. The words left her mouth before she'd weighed them. Declan's brows rose, his mouth parting like she'd knocked the wind out of him. That's not a thing you say unless you mean it. Her voice caught. I don't mean marriage. Not truly. Just to keep eyes off me while we search. He looked at her, long and quiet, then down at Waylon's sleeping face. Wouldn't sit right, lying like that. She stepped back, feeling the sting of heat rise in her cheeks. Then I'll stay behind. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the pump, filled a tin cup, and drank slow. If I'm gone more than 2 days, take the trail west. There's a widow named May near Cedar Creek. She knows my brand. She'll help. I'm not leaving you behind, she said. His eyes flicked to hers. I didn't say you would. Just covering the ground. Waylon stirred, fists waving in his sleep. Sheridan adjusted the shawl around him, her voice quieter. You still haven't asked why I stayed with him. I could have left him at the church or the sheriff's office. I didn't need to ask. But you wondered. He wiped his hands on a cloth and stepped closer. I figured it out when I saw how you kept counting his breaths. She blinked. What? First night. You thought I wasn't looking? You counted every breath he took like you were afraid he'd stop. Her throat tightened. He was sick back in Missoula. Fever wouldn't break. Clara had no money for the doctor. I sat up with him every night. His voice lowered. You saved him. He's not mine, she said. But he feels like he is. Declan nodded, slow and sure. Blood don't make family. I'd know. They stood in silence, the wind carrying the faint scent of pine smoke. A hawk drifted overhead, wings still. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small, folded paper. Clara gave me this, said it was from her sister in Helena. I never opened it. He took it, careful not to tear the fragile crease. Inside was a letter, short and scrawled. He read it once, then again. She was planning to leave town, he said. Come spring, head to Helena. Her sister was going to take them both in. Then why would she vanish? I don't think she meant to, he said. This sounds like someone afraid. Like she was trying to disappear without drawing eyes. Sheridan looked to the trail beyond the trees. You think she tried to run? Maybe. Or maybe someone stopped her. He folded the letter and handed it back. Keep it close. They didn't speak again until dusk. After Waylon fell asleep in the cradle Declan had built from pine boards, she sat across from him by the fire, her hands wrapped around a tin of tea. You ever been kissed? Declan asked, not looking at her. She startled. That's a strange thing to ask. I figured I'd rather ask than assume. She stared into the flames. There was a boy, once, when I worked the laundry in Butte. He kissed me behind the stables, then married someone else the next week. Declan stretched out his legs. He was a fool. She looked at him fully, for the first time in hours. And you? You ever come close? He ran a hand over his jaw. Once. Road fence for a rancher near Deer Lodge. His daughter used to bring me lemonade. She wanted more than I could give. What stopped you? He looked into the fire. Couldn't trust it. Thought if I let someone in, they'd leave like the rest. Sheridan's voice dropped. But you let me in. I didn't mean to, he said. But you came anyway. She stood slowly, walked to the window where moonlight lit the pane. If I came to your door without a baby, without trouble, would you have let me stay? He rose, stepped behind her. Yes. She turned and they were only a breath apart. He didn't touch her. Just said, if you ever want me near, you only have to say it. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The silence between them said enough. The next morning, the wind had shifted. It carried the scent of black soil and turned the sky a pale, washed blue. Declan saddled the bay mare instead of his gelding. She was quieter in the woods and packed only what he could carry in the bedroll. Sheridan stood by the porch rail, Waylon bundled against her hip, his breath soft against her collar. I'll keep the fire going, she said, her voice even, though her fingers gripped the railing hard enough to pale the knuckles. Declan adjusted the cinch. There's a narrow draw behind Rusk's place. I'll come in from the east. If I don't find anything by nightfall, I'll circle toward the old mining camps. Sheridan nodded, then surprised him by stepping down from the porch. Take this, she said, offering a small tin. Boiled willow bark. You'll need it if your shoulder flares again. He took it, eyes narrowing slightly. You noticed that? You favor it when you lift anything heavy. Declan tucked the tin into his coat. You see more than you let on. She didn't answer that. Just glanced toward the tree line. Be careful. I will. He rode out at a slow pace, keeping the mare's hoofs to soft ground. He didn't look back. Sheridan stood still for a long while before turning inside. The cabin felt larger without him in it and colder despite the steady fire. She laid Waylon down in the cradle and pulled a chair near, mending one of the baby's shirts by hand. The thread kept knotting. Her hands weren't steady. By early afternoon, she stepped outside to fetch water. That's when she saw the rider. Not Declan. A man, broad-shouldered and pale-haired, coming up from the south trail. She ducked back inside, heart thudding. He didn't wear a badge, but the way he sat his horse was too stiff for a rancher. She reached for Declan's rifle, resting near the hearth, and set it across her lap. The knock was sharp. Ma'am, the man called. Looking for a woman with a baby. You seen anything unusual? Sheridan didn't answer. Waylon stirred, soft and restless. The man tried again. Name's Marston. I'm with the sheriff's office out of Missoula. We've got reason to believe she passed this way. Sheridan kept still. I ain't here to cause trouble, he added. Just need to ask a few questions. Still, she said nothing. Eventually, the hoofbeats moved on. A long time passed before she lowered the rifle, her breath tight in her ribs. She didn't open the door again until the last light was going. That night, she didn't sleep. She kept the lamp low and the rifle within reach. Waylon fussed only once and she fed him with shaking hands. Time crawled. Declan returned the next morning, streaked with ash and mud and smelling sharply of creosote. Sheridan opened the door before he could knock. You're hurt. He shook his head. Not mine. His boots dragged across the threshold. She took his coat and hung it by the fire. What happened? Rusk's cabin burned. Still warm when I got there. No sign of him. But I found this. He handed her a strip of torn muslin. Bloodied. Matches Clara's dress, he said. I remember it. Sheridan sat down hard. So she was there. Likely not alone. There were 2 bedrolls. One small. A child? Maybe. Waylon let out a sudden cry and Sheridan rose, pressing him close. Declan stood, watching her. There's another thing, he said. Footprints led north. One set small, barefoot. One heavier. Like someone chasing. She rocked Waylon gently. You think she ran? I think she tried. They stood in silence, broken only by the baby's soft breathing. Then Sheridan said, Did you ever want a family? The question caught him off guard. His hand tightened on the back of the chair. Not until the war ended, he said slowly. Then I started noticing the quiet, the empty saddles, the way no one waited at the porch. She didn't speak, just shifted Waylon slightly and looked toward the window. I'm not asking, she said finally. But I think I need to know what kind of man you are. Declan stepped closer. The kind who keeps his word and doesn't leave people behind. She turned to face him. Even when they're not yours to keep? He reached up, gently brushing a bit of ash from her cheek. Especially then. She didn't pull away. Her gaze held steady. There was no heat in the moment, only something deeper recognition. You should rest, she said, soft now. I will. That night, he stayed downstairs, the rifle leaned against the wall beside him. Sheridan lay in the loft, Waylon curled into the crook of her arm, but sleep didn't come easy. Her mind circled around the image of the burned cabin, the torn cloth, the bare footprints in the dirt. She thought of Clara out there, somewhere between woods and water, and wondered if she was still running. And she thought of Declan, quiet and steady in the dark below, watching over them both without asking anything in return. Morning came slow, gold light creeping across the floorboards. Sheridan came down the ladder with Waylon in her arms to find Declan already stirring the coals. I'll ride north today, he said. Follow the trail past the ridge. Let me come, she said. He looked at her, and this time he didn't say no. Sheridan rode behind Declan as they followed the narrow deer trail into the hills beyond the burned cabin. The forest here was close and dark, the air damp with rot and pine. The trail bent north steadily, climbing higher, and the horses moved slow among the rocks and roots. Sheridan had left Waylon with May, the widow Declan had mentioned, after they stopped by her homestead at dawn. The woman had opened her door without hesitation, her lined face unreadable until she looked at the child nestled in Sheridan's arms. You trust her? Sheridan had asked, voice low. With my life, Declan answered, and that had been enough. Now, as the forest thickened, Sheridan leaned forward in the saddle. How far do you think they could have gone on foot? Depends, Declan said, eyes scanning the undergrowth. If she was carrying the child, not far. If he was older, maybe 2 days' walk. There was no food in that cabin, only mold and mouse droppings. But there was a broken tin cup under the bedroll. Looked like it had been heated. Sheridan frowned. So she was trying to keep him warm. Declan nodded once, then tilted his head. Hear that? They both paused. A faint whistle, like wind through hollow wood. That's no wind, he said. Stay here. Before she could argue, he dismounted and moved ahead, rifle loose in his grip. Sheridan slid off the mare but stayed low, hand on the reins. Her heart knocked against her ribs like it was trying to break free. Declan returned minutes later, his face unreadable. There's a lean-to up ahead, he said. Empty, but there's fresh prints. Smaller than mine. Sheridan stepped forward. So they're close. Closer than I thought. There were 2 sets of prints, one dragging a little. She looked at him sharply. Injured. Could be. They led the horses on foot from there, moving as quiet as the woods would allow. The trail curved around a ridge, and then they saw it, an old trapper's shelter tucked beneath a rock shelf. Smoke rising thin from a chimney fashioned from a rusted pipe. Declan raised a hand and motioned for her to stay back. He moved forward, slow but sure. Sheridan crouched behind a fallen log, every muscle coiled tight. A voice came from inside, thin and hoarse. "Don't come closer." Sheridan bolted upright. "Clara." There was silence. Then the door creaked open and a gaunt figure stepped into the light. Clara's hair hung in tangled ropes around her face, her dress torn at the hem. She held a small boy behind her, maybe 3 or 4, his barefoot toes curling in the dirt. Her eyes landed on Sheridan, wide with disbelief. "Sherry?" Her voice was barely a breath. Sheridan stepped forward, one hand raised. "It's me. You're all right now." Clara clutched the boy tighter. "They said you took Waylon. That they were coming for you." "I waited for you," Sheridan said. "But you never came back." Clara's eyes filled, and she sank to her knees. "He found out I planned to go. Rusk. He said if I left, she broke off. So I waited until he passed out drunk and ran with Eli." Declan lowered his rifle and approached slowly. "What happened to him?" "I set fire to the cabin on my way out," Clara said. "Didn't think it'd catch the roof, but it did. I didn't stay to see. I couldn't take the baby too. I thought he'd slow us all down. I told Sherry to keep him safe." "You did the right thing," Sheridan said, kneeling beside her. Clara began to sob, body shaking with the weight of it. Sheridan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, holding her steady. Declan looked over at the boy. "He hurt." Clara shook her head. "Just cold. We've been living off roots and boiled bark." "We've got food," Declan said. "And a wagon back near the pass. We'll get you both out of here." Clara looked up. "Will they believe me?" "They will," Declan said. "Because I'll make them." They stayed one more night in the shelter, warming the 2 children and feeding them until color returned to their faces. Sheridan watched Declan as he built the fire, his hands steady even as his clothes soaked through with melted snow. He didn't say much, but each time she met his gaze, he held it. Later, after the children slept, she found him outside, sharpening his knife by lantern light. "I keep thinking of what would have happened if you hadn't come," she said. He didn't look up. "But I did." She stepped closer. "You never asked what I want to do next." He placed the blade aside. "Didn't figure you'd made up your mind yet." "I have." Her voice was quiet. "I want to stay." He turned then. "With me?" She nodded. "If you'll have me." There was no rush in him, no surprise. Just a slow breath, and then his hand reached for hers. "I've been waiting for you to say that." She leaned against him, the cold biting through her coat, but his arms wrapped around her and the warmth began to rise. They stood like that until the lantern flickered out, the woods around them hushed and full of breath. And for the first time in a long while, there was nothing left to run from. They left the trapper's shelter at first light. The wind had eased and the clouds hung low and quiet over the trees, carrying the promise of more snow. Declan walked beside the wagon while Sheridan rode alongside Clara and the children, one hand steady on the reins, the other resting protectively on the seat's edge. Clara sat wrapped in a patched shawl May had sent with Declan. Her face looked clearer now, pale but no longer drawn with fear. She held her son close, and though she hadn't spoken much since the fire, her eyes followed the trail ahead with a focus that hadn't been there before. Sheridan glanced toward Declan. "What'll happen now?" He didn't look up from the trail. "We get her to Maze. You and I return to town. Quietly. I'll speak with Sheriff Edmonds myself. And if he won't listen?" Declan's jaw tightened. "He will. I've done enough work for him. He owes me more than a few favors." They reached May's homestead before dusk. The older woman stepped out at the sound of the wagon and helped Clara inside without a word. Sheridan stayed only long enough to see Waylon safe in her arms. He blinked up at her, still sleepy from an afternoon nap, and curled his fingers into her coat as she kissed the top of his head. "I'll come back after the hearing," she promised. May gave a slight nod. "Bring news worth the trip." On the ride into Missoula, neither she nor Declan spoke much. The horses moved at a steady pace, their breath fogging into the cold, and above them the sky broke into the kind of deep orange fade that always seemed to catch the edge of the mountains just so. When they reached town, they left the horses stabled behind the livery and walked the rest of the way, keeping to the alleys where the shadows held. Declan didn't knock on the sheriff's door. He opened it and stepped inside like someone who'd earned the right. Edmonds looked up from his desk, eyes narrowing. "You've got some nerve, Vaughn." Declan stepped aside, letting Sheridan enter behind him. "You've been chasing the wrong person." Sheridan met the sheriff's gaze head-on. "The woman you're after left town to save her life. I took care of her son because she couldn't." Edmonds leaned back, fingers drumming on the wood. "You have proof." Declan set the torn muslin and the letter from Clara's sister on the desk. "More than enough. And witnesses. You want to keep chasing this, you'll be the one answering questions." The sheriff studied the items, then looked up again. "You trying to play hero, Vaughn?" "No," Declan said. "Just trying to do right." It was quiet for a long moment. Then Edmonds sighed and slid the papers aside. "She's not our problem anymore," he said, voice low. "Neither are you." Outside, Sheridan let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Declan looked at her. "It's done. I didn't think it would be that easy." "It wasn't," he said. "It just ended that way." They stayed the night in a small cabin behind the feed store, one Declan had used during cattle drives. The stove hissed and popped as it warmed, and Sheridan sat by the window watching the snow fall in slow spirals past the lamplight. Declan poured 2 cups of coffee and passed one to her. "You ever picture what comes after?" She turned toward him. "After what?" "All of it. Running. Looking over your shoulder. Wondering who'll knock next." She didn't answer for a while. Then, "I used to imagine a porch. Just a small one. With someone beside me who didn't want to leave." "You still want that?" "If it's still possible." Declan set his cup down. "I've got land. Room for whatever comes next. And I'm not planning on leaving." Her voice went quiet. "You're not just saying that because I've got a baby with me? I'm saying it because I want you. Because I've wanted you since I saw you standing in that clearing, ready to protect someone who wasn't yours." She stood and crossed the room to where he sat. When she reached him, she didn't speak. She reached out and took his hand. He rose, his fingers curling around hers, and leaned in. The kiss was slow, certain, and when it ended, neither moved away. That night, they lay together in the quiet warmth of the cabin, not rushed or desperate but steady, like 2 people who'd already chosen each other long before their lips met. In the weeks that followed, things settled like snow after a storm. Clara and her son stayed on with May through the winter, helping with chores and keeping each other company. Waylon grew stronger, his cheeks rounding out, and Clara laughed again softly at first, then with more ease as the days passed. Sheridan and Declan returned to the cabin in the hills. They built a second room onto the house, and Declan carved a cradle with his own hands, every curve sanded smooth. Sheridan stitched curtains from old flour sacks and planted hollyhocks along the porch. They didn't speak vows in a church, but they made promises all the same, silent, daily ones that took root deeper than words. By spring, the valley bloomed in full. One morning, Sheridan stepped out onto the porch just as the sun crested the ridge. She wore a cotton dress Declan had traded for in town, and her hands rested on the curve of her belly where new life stirred. Declan came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and pressed his lips to her temple. "Think he'll be a brother or sister?" he asked. "Doesn't matter," she said, smiling. "They'll have us either way." Waylon toddled through the yard, chasing a chicken, laughing with a sound that filled the air like bells. Sheridan leaned into Declan's chest, content. They had weathered fire and fear, silence and snow, and come through it together, whole. The porch was small, just as she'd pictured, but it held everything she needed: